So it will be like a quiz. This miracle is after learning of John the Baptist's death. Jesus sought solitude, but he was followed by a multitude of people. So any guess, brothers? Okay, I will go to the next question. This probably you may be able to answer. So this miracle is the one which is recounted in all the four Gospels. In the Synoptic Gospel, it comes after Herod Antipas' receipt of the report about Jesus' activity, but with differing intervening materials in other Gospels. Okay, so
Jesus feeding the 5,000.
Yes, brother. Right.
I saw the verse.
Okay. So today we will look into the miracle of Jesus feeding the 5,000. So as I said, this miracle is the only miracle which is recounted in all the four Gospels, and I just took Mark's Gospel because it gives an elaborate view and it contains all the things that is required. So I'll just read through this passage, which is in Mark chapter 6, verse 30 to 44. Then the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had thought. And he said to them, "Come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while, for there were many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat." So they departed and to a deserted place in the boat by themselves. But the multitude saw them departing, and many knew him and ran there on foot from all the cities. They arrived before them and came together to him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion for them, because they were like sheep not having a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. When the day was now far spent, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and already the hour is late. Send them away, that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat." But he answered and said to them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat?" But he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he commanded them to make them all sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in ranks, in hundreds and in 50s. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of fragments and of the fish. Now those who had eaten the loaves were about 5,000 men. So some of the things that I observed in each of these Gospels, both Matthew and Luke's Gospel, they underscore Jesus' concern for the holistic well-being of his followers, addressing their physical, psychological, and spiritual needs. Despite diverse motives among the crowd, Jesus demonstrates compassion for all. And this is kind of very unique in Matthew and Luke's Gospel, and that again adds to the principle or aligns to the principle of what Paul exhorts to Galatians chapter 6 verse 10, that we should work for the good of everyone, particularly those within the faith community. So in Mark's account, Mark's Gospel, as I said, it gives an elaborate descriptive way of recording this miraculous event. There is a significant human element in this miraculous event. Jesus and his disciples needed time away in order to replicate. So they just hear the news that John the Baptist was beheaded, and Jesus went on solitude, and that is a time when they were also very much in hunger, and so however people were waiting for them when they arrived in what was to be a private place. In spite of his own tiredness, Jesus once again had compassion on these people. However, the disciples seemed frustrated and angry. Why could not he send these people away? The disciples needed to learn to have compassion on people who were spiritually and physically in need. Instead, they allowed their own human needs to harden their hearts. Knowing their struggle and resentment, Jesus insisted that they get in a boat by themselves and return to the other side of the lake. He then spent time in prayer alone. So here, Mark gives some additional information about the situation that they are in. They themselves are in that tiredness and hunger, and in spite of that, Jesus is concerned and is compassionate, but the disciples are frustrated and they were in anger. And finally, coming to the John's Gospel, so Matthew, Mark, and Luke also recorded this miracle. Matthew and Luke both focused on Christ's concern for the whole person, body, soul, and spirit. Mark emphasizes putting others first. But when John described this miracle, he focused on Jesus' concern for individuals, as revealed in his interaction with Philip. So, the interaction with Philip is not recorded in any other Gospels. Only John records this interaction, and again here the there are lessons for us. Also to learn from understanding who Jesus is. So Philip did not yet comprehend how Jesus could be equal with God, the Father. Jesus understood Philip's doubts and knew he would continue to struggle with this issue. In fact, Philip was still struggling months later at the Passover meal in Jerusalem. Consequently, before Jesus multiplied the loaves and fish, he directed a question to Philip in order to test him, not to set him up for failure, but to help him to grow in his faith. Jesus asked him, "Where will we buy bread so these people can eat?" So, in this Gospel of John, Jesus asked a question to Philip, and it's not a question that Jesus is asking him to kind of get the answer from, but rather it's a kind of a test. Jesus knows what he will be doing. He will feed these people by his power, but just to test the perspective of his disciple, he asked this question, and that is something unique in the Gospel of John. So we'll look into some of the context as to how we can understand this in our situation. This is a video which explains about the current situation in our country. Out of, I think, 127 countries, our country stands at 111 in the Global Hunger Index. So this gives a little more statistics on. This is some of the statistics about our nation of India. I think many of us might have seen this picture of the vulture and the little girl. So this was also featured in the Pulitzer Prize. So the photographer who took this photo, he, after 4 months after being awarded this Pulitzer Prize for feature photography, Carter, the photographer, died of suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning on 27 July 1994 at age 33. So this was somewhere in Africa. So the little girl there, she was about to reach to United Nations food, the program that they have, and this picture speaks a lot more than the facts. How hunger and we see this miracle. A lot of things about God, who cares for little things which we ignore. The hairs in our head, the nails in our hand, we don't understand until we are completely bald and we have hair fall issue. We don't really care about the hair and the growth in our nail, or many of those things, the little things of this life. But God cares about all this. He says, I have numbered the hair in your head. And even when we cry, it's not in vain. God says that I keep track of all those. He says He collects all the tears in a bottle. And in Isaiah 49:16, He says, I have written your name in the palm of my hand. And when He says about the food and also the cloth, Jesus says, if that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will He not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So in this miracle of feeding 5,000, there were many things that I was able to grasp. I know this miracle, but I just looked into only the very aspect of Jesus multiplying the bread and fish and feeding the people. But when we actually look into each of the things that has happened in this miracle, the fact that Jesus blessed the or gave thanks to the Father, it tells about the fact that when he was about to be crucified on the Passover meal, the Last Supper, when he took the bread, the scripture says he gave the thanks. He said, "This is my body that is going to be broken for you." And he took the cup and said, "This is the blood of new covenant." So we will look into the application, but I was just comparing of what Jesus did in terms of thanking God and God who provides. So we saw that in the Gospel of Mark, when the disciples and Jesus, they themselves were hungry and tired, but yet Jesus was always concerned about others, and so he is the one who provides. And we know that God, to the Jews, to the Israelites, when they were in the wilderness, there was no food, and they were given the food that was given to the angels. Manna from heaven was given, and here Jesus is the manna from heaven for us, and he has become the bread of life. And he miraculously led the Israelites, and he is still today miraculously feeding us with the manna that is required for us. As Jesus, when he was tempted in the wilderness, he said, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but every word that proceeds from the mouth of God." So for us today, yes, we need the food for our body nourishment and the strength, but more than that, it is the word of God that is required for us. And we see the miracle of Jesus here. Only 5 loaves and 2 fish were there, and God multiplied that. So he's a God who multiplies. And we have also seen the miracle where Jesus turned the water into wine, and he spat on the ground, and he opened the eyes of the blind. So he uses these earthly things, and he does the miracle exponentially that is impossible for any other person to do. And also we saw that Jesus blesses and gives thanks before he gave to the people. One of the things that even Shashi Tharoor and many others who tries to say the British rule which destroyed our nation, they say that our nation was trillions of dollars and the British came and looted everything. They point to this Bengal famine as one of the worst things that British has done. The Bengal famine in 1943 was one of the worst disasters in 20th century South Asia. It was devastating in terms of its scale, causing 3 million deaths, and occurred during the midst of World War II, when India was under the British Raj. So Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister, and due to the World War, there was need for food in UK, United Kingdoms, and our nation in Bengal, we already were hit by this famine, and there were a lot of disease and need for the food here, but there was a mismanagement, and that is how they portray and say that it is completely a dehumanizing factor what the British has done. But I read from this book called Colonialism, A Moral Reckoning from Miguel Picker. What he says was that the kind of technology, that kind of information that they had at that time, it was a miscommunication and not a deliberate effort to kill the people in the famine. And he also argues the fact that the colonizing is not all that evil, or what the right wing today tries to portray, but rather they had principles, they had various other factors that led to all the disaster and the things that people like Shashi Tharoor would like to say. So also we might have heard about Elon Musk, one of the richest person. He said, if I think it's World Food Organization, WFP, can describe on this Twitter thread exactly how 6 billion will solve world hunger. I will sell Tesla stock right now and do it. So this is how the billionaires plan to eradicate the hunger. But how, as believers, I'm taking Brother Moses Raj's name here, and I observed once, I think when we were going for the distribution, he had a small parcel in his car, and he gave to a person who came asking. So I would like to just hear if Brother, he does it regularly, or how that he got that idea of doing that. So maybe just when you share your thoughts, you can share about that, Brother. So we should care for our fellow beings. So as we saw in the miracle, when Jesus saw that the people were hunger, and he asked the disciples to give them something as a testing. He finally, he said, these are people who are like lost sheep without the shepherd. So he has become the manna for us even today. So what we should be doing is to have the same compassion what Jesus had, and not only to look for ourselves. Yes, we may be hungry, we may have many problems, many things to look at, but helping others, specifically in providing the food that is required for this life, it's something which we need to think about doing. And I was just thinking about few things, like for example, when Jesus heard about John the Baptist being beheaded, why he did not even stop John the Baptist to be arrested in the first place, and even after being beheaded, Jesus says that no prophet is greater than John the Baptist. Such love that he had, he went to Lazarus' tomb and he resurrected Lazarus, but why not John the Baptist? And another thought was like, if he fed 5,000 only men, and there will be much more women and children, why he did not allow Lazarus, the other Lazarus, the Lazarus and the rich man, when this Lazarus was dying out of hunger. We know the story of Elijah fed by the raven. Why God did not, and even when I saw that picture of the African little girl, why God did not provide the food that was required. And many die with malnutrition. The statistics which I showed about the Indian, the global hunger index, many children will die out of the malnutrition. So why God allows such things to happen? And also I was just reminded about Judas Iscariot, when Jesus was anointed by this women by breaking the alabaster jar, which was so valuable. Judas said this could have been used for the poor. So such is the same case with, in terms of understanding God's will. The purpose of John the Baptist was being a forerunner. He showed the path to the people who Jesus is, and his purpose and his role, I think it was accomplished, and God was glorified in his life. And we know that Lazarus, even after when Jesus resurrected him, eventually died after that. So for each purpose, each of the things that God does, there is a purpose. And specifically coming to Judas Iscariot, when he said, why is this waste of money? This could have been given to poor. His intention was not to care for the poor, but rather he was interested in the value of the money itself. Because we know that after, when he was betraying Jesus, he took that 30 silver coins. So God knows our intentions, what our hearts and all the attitudes and the motivation behind it. So all these billionaires who tries to tell that we will do all those things, it's all in God's sovereignty, that if he wants to use them to eradicate the hunger, he will do it. But as believers, what we should be doing is to have the same compassion that Jesus had. And the other thing that I thought was, like, we were discussing about visiting the orphanage, and that I think we definitely should do this in the coming month. So we should plan and visit for this orphanage visit, and we need to multiply. Yes, we need many more hands to help and support. And finally, let us also bless and give thanks to God. I really am ashamed to say this. Whenever I have food, I always forget to thank God. And I've been very conscious these few days, that each and every moment that we get something to eat, it is purely because of God's grace. And if Jesus can thank before he being crucified, the Passover meal, that he thanked the bread, he thanks God the Father in this miracle of feeding the 5,000. How much more we should be thankful for all the goodness that God has done. So it's a reminder for me to thank God for each and everything, not only the food but also all the other aspects of life where I ignored thanking God. Yeah, so these are few of my thoughts.